The views, comments, and opinions of the following program do not necessarily reflect those of Morris Media Studios, MorrisMediaLive.com, or its affiliates. Listener discretion is advised.
And we see that Nima Atwa, Amenemhet III of the 12th dynastic period, 1843 to 1797, was also Wasetian. You can see his locks thousands of years ago, over almost 4,000 years ago, wearing the locks, which is a tradition and culture that came up out of the Nile Valley of ancient Kushite Ethiopia.
I've been looking this way ever since I remember, and it ain't gonna change, so I don't care what them people say.
Going into our Africans. This is who we are. See the crown? See the crown? This is where it comes from. Most of the crowns were designed off of African hairdos. See that? And even got this blanket. Niggas talking about the crown came from somewhere called when they were shut up.
I've been looking this way ever since I remember, and it ain't gonna change, so I don't care what them people say. I will forever be this way. I will forever be this way.
The war without the bloodshed is defined as politics, coming at you all the way live.
That's right.
Melanated Politics is right back in your grill. With me again, my dear brother from PG County, Maryland,
Yes, indeed.
Mr. David Harper. Good to see you again, my brother.
Good to see you too, bro. How you feeling?
I'm doing absolutely well, and I am, by way of Compton, California, Eric Clark. Thank you so much for tuning back in. It's been a long time.
Shouldn't have left you without some dope politics to step to.
So y'all can go ahead and call in, as you always do, at 323-815-4204. And on the menu today is that good old-fashioned voter suppression, the statue removal of Confederate heroes and Superman. I think all the statues should have been kept up. What do you think?
We'll get into that later. We gotta keep it going because the intro will be too long if we start getting into it now. So I'll just talk about it later.
And also, we're going to put out there how America actually obtained its wealth. Mm-hmm. It's called King Cotton. Mm-hmm. That's the bottom line. Mm-hmm. King Cotton, y'all. But first, the critical race theory in America has these Republicans as hot as McDonald's French fry grease. These Republicans have not been this upset since Colin Kaepernick took a knee.
True.
I mean, are you serious? So, without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at this critical race theory, and David and I will talk about it on the other side. So, if DJ, if you don't mind, go ahead and drop
The
that.
whole purpose of critical race theory is to provide Americans with a way to understand the legacy of racism, even though those stories sometimes hurt.
It's anti-American training that vilifies white people and demands they apologize.
The best learning for students about social studies and about our democracy and our country is the learning where students can really grapple with the issues and really come to a deeper understanding of how our past informs our present.
All of this revisionist, woke curriculum, you are not going to do this to our children.
Teachers across the country are caught in the middle of the latest flashpoint in America's culture war, critical race theory. So what exactly is it? And why is there a push to ban it in schools?
Critical race theory is a body of ideas and a set of approaches to understanding the history and the present of American society that looks at the ways in which racial unfairness have been woven into the fabric of our institutions.
In other words, critical race theory, or CRT for short, is a legal academic framework centered on the idea that racism is systemic. It first started to coalesce in the 1970s, when Black, Hispanic, and Asian legal scholars were researching the persistence of inequality despite the landmark legal victories of the civil rights era.
The legal scholars undertook a set of analyses and investigations that were aimed at trying to make sense of the puzzling persistence of racism in our legal system, in our political system, in our economy.
CRT has been studied in fields like sociology, economics, and political science.
Okay.
Tell me about it.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's go back for a second with CRT, critical race theory. This is not new. If you look at the Constitution doesn't say anything about slavery, even though slavery doesn't exist. Slavery existed. Slavery existed immensely by the quote-unquote founding fathers, particularly the southern states. But it was not mentioned in the Constitution. It's the relationship America has with Black people.
Yes, sir.
Is one that's never, I don't want to say it's never changed, but it's an uncomfortable relationship that they don't want to admit to. And it's always
or address.
And it's always been like this. Let's start with the Civil War. We can go there. We can go to the Civil Rights Movement. But bottom line, the conversation about America's relationship with Black people
and history
in general.
Yes,
because basically it's rooted to, I don't want to go on to the Constitutional Convention and everything they talked about.
And the 3/5 of a man clause.
Not just 3/5 of a man clause, but
and the 13th Amendment.
And not just the 13th Amendment. Everything, when they were writing the Constitution, they originally did not want to go there. They went there to amend the Articles of Confederation, but they did not want to. Slavery just kept coming up. They didn't want to talk about slavery, but slavery kept coming up. Black people, because the South wanted to count their slaves, but they want to have
adequate representation.
They want to have adequate representation, but not have their slaves truly have freedom and representation for themselves.
Exactly.
So they wanted just to put it, bluntly, they wanted their cake and eat it too. They wanted representation, but they didn't want the rights for Black folks, because the Black folks were their slaves, was their property. So when you're talking about America, white America's relationship with history, that part of it has always been omitted and uncomfortable. So now with this conversation of CRT is the boogeyman,
yes,
or the boogie, I guess, term.
Yes.
But really, they don't want to talk about history, period.
Absolutely, because the truth will do either two things. It will set you free, or it will hurt your feelings. And these people have dealt with feelings, living in a bubble, shaping a continuous narrative, because let's keep in mind, whoever wins the war, whoever obtains the land, writes and rewrites the history books, which goes back to the perpetual narrative.
Absolutely.
Because we talked about American exceptionalism before, where, let's just say, before anything changes, it's sort of like being an alcoholic. You have to admit you're an alcoholic, admit that you
have a problem.
I have a problem.
That's what you're trying to say. Admit that you have a problem.
No, alcoholics have a problem.
Alcoholics, Okay.
Moving right along.
Yes.
But denial is real in the United States regarding the truth about American history, regarding the Trail of Tears, regarding the indigenous melanated Africans that came over here before the slave trade, Olmecs, whomever else in Central South Mexico, Central South America, Mexico, Canada, etc. So there's always been a denial. And you know what's crazy? I said this before. Growing up in Europe, growing up in Compton, I always, as a young man, was ashamed of being black. I thought my features were just, I thought that, I don't know, maybe this was about, I don't know, maybe this when DeBarge and them was out and the whole, I don't know.
The DeBarge family commenced
One of my
everybody
favorite
up.
groups, Peace
Incredible.
and Love, Respect. Y'all know what I'm
Beautiful,
talking
beautiful family.
Anyway, they know what it is. We don't have to do no clarifying. But the bottom line is, once I picked up a few books, 'cause I love to read, but there was a few brothers that lived in our neighborhood off of Compton Boulevard. And they always pass us books and give out books, and these was basically history books like what we saw at the introduction. See, that's why we see if you stop mentioning Trayvon Martin, you'll forget about that. That's why Rosewood is such a shock to people, because we don't talk about it anymore.
Right.
That's why Elaine, Arkansas is a shock. That's why a lot of these different areas where, because we were having money and being successful and moving forward and doing things we've always have done, which has been omitted in the United States school system, we have to continue. Now, do I support the critical race theory? I'm with the truth. And what these Republicans are lying about is, that's not something, David, that's being promoted. That's not something that they're just saying, okay, this is the K through 12 curriculum. But as we always say around these parts, do not spit in my face and then run around here and tell me that it's raining.
There's a lot of spitting going on, a lot of raining going on.
I know that was a lot, but
yeah, no. Right now, not just Republicans, but just this country's in a place where there's a fight for the truth, or in some ways, some people say there's a fight for the identity of the country and seeing how we're going to be, where we're going to be, how we're going to, what kind of country we're going to be.
yes.
And probably one of the best examples of that was in seeing, if you observe the election of Barack Obama and then the election of Donald Trump right after, and you're wondering, you have one man that's talking about that there's no Black America, no white America, there's the United States of America, and then there's one guy saying, make America great again, but these are S-hole countries with melanated people coming into the U.S. So it's been, this battle is real. And I've heard the term cold civil war, and I can't say that term is wrong. I do feel after January 6th, that was a great example. January 6th was a great example of a war on the identity
And they
of
are
America.
in denial about that. And the big lie.
They're in denial about a lot of things. They're in denial about a lot of things. But it's real.
But let me ask a quick question. The narrative that they're shaping regarding January 6th, not a big deal. Most Republicans believe in the big lie. Joe Biden is an illegitimate president. Okay? That has been effective. How much more effective do you think that will be going into future elections? Because we both know this is a culture war. How long will this culture war continue, and how effective will it be for the Republicans going forward? Because we know the Democrats are some straight up punks.
That's a great that's a great question.
Straight up.
The issue, Democrats have a larger coalition, a more fragile coalition. I'll try to speed this up.
Yes.
They have more people that they have to bring together.
Yeah.
Republicans don't. And Republicans are going to. Let me rewind for a second. There's an internal battle with the Republican Party.
Okay.
It's going to depend on if it's going to be Trump all the way or if they're going to splinter off. And we'll see that the answer to your question will come to fruition. We'll see parts of it in the 2022 midterms and the 2024 presidential election, because it probably won't be Joe Biden. And we'll see who has more of an upper hand in this war that we're fighting. Democrats have to play more chess than the Republicans. Republicans can play checkers all day because they don't have a large coalition at all. So that's kind of where we are.
Now we've both seen these town hall meetings. Mm-hmm. We both observe these politricksters with their critical race hating. Mm-hmm. What do you think about all of that?
I mean, they're playing defense.
Their overall opposition to the critical race theory.
Their opposition is critical race theory is just the title they want to attack. They want to rewrite or not talk about history. They don't want to admit history. They want. Yes. I think we showed a video a couple months back, maybe a month ago, a month and a half ago, of I think it was in Tennessee, a Tennessee local statesman, congressman, that's saying let's show both sides of slavery. There are no both sides of slavery. There's evil, there's good, and there's evil. There's no both sides of it. But that's the same mentality that Donald Trump had in Charlottesville when he said there were good people on both sides. It's a let's look at the other hand. There's no other hand. The country was built off of the genocide war against Native Americans, the slavery of black people, the pushing out of Mexicans from different parts of the country in the West, in the South, in Texas.
California, Texas,
Arizona. In Texas, they want to do Texas history and do, hey, we want us to do this Texas history and not talk about the Mexicans that were in Texas.
Just like September 11th and the Iraq War was something that the culprits of those attacks were supposedly posted up in Afghanistan, correct? But Iraqi citizens also had to pay the price. So we saw in real time how these people operate. Mm-hmm. Could you imagine the Mexican-American War before the cameras and the YouTube? See, when you listen to some of these songs, they say from sea to shining sea. That's why Lewis and Clark infiltrated the Native brothers and sisters and said, "Oh, look at this land we knew nothing about." And then comes the railroads and et cetera, et cetera. And as we always say, please go get that book called 100 Years of Lynching. Very, very, very good resourceful book regarding at the turn of the century and a little bit prior to that, just thousands of melanated bodies that were strung up from trees and set on fire in the name of white supremacy and maintaining white supremacy and the white power structure that is still trying to be maintained today. But we have to continue to put this information out there. And like we were saying earlier, follow the money, right?
Follow the money. Always have to follow the money. But also follow who's going to benefit from this.
Yes.
In this particular case, the only beneficiaries to this type of battle, this type of culture war, as far as history books, is really white folks of a certain ilk.
Yes.
And there are white folks that know history, embrace history. There truly is. We showed the video of the white teacher up there, okay, who said, "Hey, we got to talk about this." But then there's a good portion of them that's like, "Look, the past is the past. Let's not talk about it. Let's not discuss it, and it wasn't really that bad."
Well, I don't see these same people going to a Holocaust museum and saying, "Let's stop talking about that."
Because you know why?
And let me tell you something.
You know why
else.
that is?
I lived in Germany, bro. I lived in Frankfurt, Germany for 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I lived at a place called Rhein Air Force Base.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. One thing about Germany, in Germany, they teach kids about the Holocaust.
So
they don't walk away saying, I feel like it is what it is. I mean, there's a certain level of intellect and maturity and reality and consciousness and humanity that goes along with the obtaining of critical, realistic information. Now, we can Disneyland this up if we want to, but at the end of the day, 2 times 2 will always be 4, and 1 plus 1 will always be 2.
Here's the big
bottom
difference.
line.
Bottom line, you're absolutely right, but here's the big difference.
Yes.
In Germany, there was a reconciliation. In Germany, they put that in the past because they worked on it. After, we've talked about it constantly, whether it's Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Trayvon Martin. That's the reality now. And that connection is still to the history of America. And that's one of the reasons why they don't want to talk about it. Because
it's really disrespectful, man.
Hey, but that's America.
That's disrespectful. Shut up. We don't want to talk about it. It's in the past. But the reason why it's like being online and hiding behind your keyboard, right? These same people, they wouldn't say that in a crowd of black folk.
No.
They would not say these same people that we see on these different public outlets that say it's over, forget about it, it's in the past, it's not that serious, LeBron has all this money, Barack Obama, Oprah. They wouldn't say that in the middle. They wouldn't say that in the middle of any variation of social class of black folk. It's like I said, it's like being on the internet and hiding behind your keyboard. Now, let's go back to the original question. Mm-hmm. Follow the money. How did America obtain its wealth? It's called King Cotton. What does it have to do with, let's tie that into the critical race theory. King Cotton and how America obtained its wealth is something that they want to continue to hide from us, have it kept swept under the rug, dilute it, water it down, put it to the side, and ignore it. But I tell you what, DJ, let's go ahead and show how America got rich, and it's called King Cotton.
Texas officials are trying to tell teachers that they should teach that slavery was a side issue in the Civil War. They forgot the story of King Cotton. King Cotton bacon, King Cotton sausage, King Cotton rolls. It was just like a big food brand in the South. I had all these memories of King Cotton in my childhood, and then I found out what it meant. The slogan King Cotton was used by people in the South who were advocating South separate from the North and form their own country. And it was never more eloquently stated than by this Senator, James Hammond from South Carolina. Without firing a gun, without drawing a sword, should they make war on us, we could bring the whole world to our feet. What would happen if no cotton was furnished for 3 years? England would topple headlong and carry the whole civilized world with her, save the South. You dare not make war on cotton. No power on earth dares to make war upon it. Cotton is king. And they were right. That cotton production, 2.25 billion pounds a year. In 1860, there were 4 million slaves, 13% of the entire United States population. And the value of slaves in 1860 was more than the value of every bank, railroad, and factory combined. A market value of $3 billion in 1860 money. Does the term follow the money mean anything to us? This is what made America wealthy. This was the formation of wealth. And folks, I just want to make sure as a side note to say, I hope you don't think that the money made from slavery just dissolved and went up into the air. It went into companies and businesses.
Ladies and gentlemen, seeing is believing.
That's probably one of the best arguments, debate arguments, legitimate arguments for reparations.
Right there.
Just in that alone. Just in that alone.
Right there.
Right there, practical. And why when the whole argument of, well, my family didn't own slaves.
But you benefit from that.
But you benefited from it. The companies benefited from it. The companies that if you bank at Bank of America, Chase, all of them.
Look how many people in America were left in inheritance, and then follow the trail. I'm not saying every single individual, but there it is right there.
It's right there.
I mean, what else more? If you saw that video, having a soul and a spirit and a conscience has to come into play. Because at some point, our opinion does not matter. The facts matter.
Facts should matter. It should.
I'm not a mechanic. I'm not going to walk around the corner where the mechanics are and give them my opinion on the transmission that they're repairing. My opinion does not matter. We're just talking about the laws of common sense.
Well, laws of common sense and.
But that's King Cotton. That's King Cotton.
It's supposed to be the laws
of
just, just honest dignity, just having some type of dignity. But that's another reason why they don't want to teach history, the real history of this country.
Yes.
One of the reasons why they don't want to do any of that, because it shines a light to statements, arguments, debates that's you can't refute. You can't refute. You can't refute facts. And I think that also destroys the bubble of American apple pie, of America being this incredible, the ideals.
If you just work hard, you will be successful. If you're not successful, whether that's individually or from a generational perspective,
that's on you.
You just
that they say that's on you.
You didn't work hard enough.
You didn't work hard enough. That's on you. When you really research, again, going back to the Constitutional Convention and the battles they were having, and how many of those battles had to deal with us. How many, and there was this one governor of Pennsylvania, this Governor Morris, who actually hated slavery. He spoke out against it. He said, this is the scourge of the country.
Yes, sir.
Of course, he was in the minority when they were in Philadelphia Independence Hall writing it. But I say all that to say that those feelings and emotions in writing that piece of paper and wanting to put it up as a glorious piece of work that covered everything still affects us today, reverberates today, with not talking about history of what is going on, like with King Cotton. With King Cotton, what it just showed. Those are facts. That's history. If you want to talk about the black community, black folks in general, and the lack of access to capital.
Yes, sir.
Not having enough teachers. You go down the line, the wealth disparity, everything.
The wealth gap.
The wealth gap. The roots of it.
The grandfather clause.
The roots of it goes back to
the black codes.
The black codes. It goes back to slavery. It goes back to the building of this country. It goes back to that. And if we can't talk about it, then how does this country get to be where it became? Seriously.
Follow
the money. But they're going to be battling this. It's going to answer your earlier question. This is going to be a constant battle, because I know a lot of people want to talk policy. If we just go after the banks and talking about having people pay their share fares, taxes, this, that, and the third. That's an important angle. But if we don't knock out the root and really discuss the root of what ails this country, then
what just hit
none
me,
of that's
Mr.
going to
Harper?
work.
When we just saw all those banks and all those institutions that benefited financially that were associated with King Cotton, they still exist today, and they're still, and peace to the organizations that are going after these insurance companies and are demanding their issue. There have been reparations that are paid out. The Jesuits, Georgetown, although I don't agree with the form in which they're it's like somebody owing you money and telling you what to do with the money. I will give you the money, Mr. Harper, as long as you go get some McDonald's.
As long as you buy some stock in this.
Yes.
As long as you do whatever.
But moving right along, that's why King Cotton is tied into the critical race theory, because that is something that they would never want young people to study. Because just to piggyback on what you said prior, it kills the whole American exceptionalism, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. As long as you work hard, you will be successful. There's no such thing. Fox News and these rest of these Confederates and the rest of these Proud Boys and QAnons and organized talking heads that are in denial. Well, they're not actually in denial. I spoke to one of my sisters earlier. These people know, okay? But they, when you win the war, you write the history books. Because freedom is based on land. If you have the land, if you don't have the land, you have no freedom.
Right.
What's the first thing they took on paper after they pulled out the muskets? The land.
The land. The land.
Who owns the land?
Owns the narrative.
There it is there.
Owns the narrative.
So look, I thought about all the things that you can make with cotton, especially back in those days, and how basically America just had a big old cotton sack, a free labor cotton sack. And that's why a lot of politicians in the North, and they're not off the hook, because they benefited from ships and chains and commerce, and everything was tied together. And now, after the murder, the cold-blooded public murder of George Floyd, and how people protested in Germany, Australia, in Lebanon, right here in the US of A and Canada, all over, there's been a so-called racial reckoning. Not for us.
Right.
Because these are things we talk about ad nauseum.
Every day.
So I'm glad I'm glad that we continue to put out this positive energy, Mr. Harper, and continue to move the ball forward. And your last thoughts about critical race theory and King Cotton before we move on, please.
This is it's something to watch, and it's something to keep an eye on.
Yes.
This war got kicked back up again after Barack Obama won, of course, after Joe Biden won.
Yes.
Donald Trump was the breath of life for a lot of people, and
General Custer.
He's the breath of life for. That's why the majority of Republicans are Donald Trump acolytes and not Republicans, and that's just the truth of it. And, that's.
He is what Stonewall Jackson was to the Confederate to who he is to the Republicans.
If you ask majority of Republicans, would you vote if Donald Trump left the Republican Party, would you back Donald Trump, or would you back the Republican Party? Most of them will say they'll back Donald Trump.
If you're a Republican right now and you're running for office in 2022, I wish you would say something wrong about Donald Trump, because you will pay in the ballot box.
Right.
You will pay.
Right.
Absolutely, you will pay. So it is what it is.
It is, but again,
and it's not what it's not.
For our audience members, especially our audience members who are overseas, it's important to kind of watch what happens between now and August and the end of the summer to see how things go, because if I know we'll get on this as far as the voting, if we're able to control, when you said control the land, if we're able to control the right and laws, that's a counteraction. If we can help write these laws and really bring some new policies in, it would help.
And I agree with that, but also we have to challenge the system, because seriously, we've been in this system for a long time.
Yes, we have.
Generation to generation to generation, we've been in the same system. Will the system change? Apparently, it doesn't look like it.
Mm-hmm.
If you go off the mathematics and the evidence, if you went off the rap sheet.
You know what? Well, listen, I believe we have a call. So let's see what the...
Should we take it?
I think we should take
Let's
it.
Let's take the call.
Hello, hello.
Hello, brothers David and Eric. How you doing today? This is Kevin.
Kevin, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing fine, man. Hope all is well with you brothers today.
Hope all is well with you too.
Good afternoon, sir.
Interesting topic as always, very insightful and informative. But I guess I would like to make a comment or two to basically start from one perspective and get into the policy aspects of critical race theory.
Okay.
If you look at history in America, it's always had a revisionist version of it. I've been on blogs, and I've even had people say that the Civil War had nothing to do with slavery.
Oh, wow.
So, you look at the revisionist aspects of history as portrayed in America. And, I even have talked to people in the South who give these so-called romanticized plantation tours and ask them, why, for some untold reason, you never leave the slave quarters on the plantation house? Why is it the tours include that? Because it's a part of the revisionists to try to romanticize something that wasn't romantic at all. So this is the psychological aspects of it, of how history is portrayed and what type of perception they try to paint in our minds. So you look at that and you can understand, even to coin the term woke culture actually means people have actually awakened and they understand the reality of the culture as opposed to the version that's portrayed. Now, if you look at critical race theory is something that gives a structural, factual aspect of American history, but that serves several different purposes. For starters, it gives us a reality check, and anything that does that sets the basis for attaining equality, even if it's non-monetary from a perception standpoint. And you got to remember, the people in this country who believe in superiority, that's the last thing that they want, because that's a silly notion, so they have to hide behind the false premise of inequity as representing superiority. But David said it best. When you give like a quantified, measurable, specific aspect of something, it leads to policy corrections, which in turn could lead to a foundation for reparations. Now, a prime example, I heard a guy on MSNBC talk about how in Minnesota in the 40s that certain farmers were allowed to purchase their land, other farmers were not. So you look at that leaves in an inequity of generational wealth that was able to be inherited.
Right.
That sets a basis for reparations, a corrective measure. Look at Manhattan Beach, California.
Great example.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
It just come to light that there was a black family that owned a large section of the beach that they were excluded from that's worth millions of dollars now.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's an effort to return the land to the descendants of the original owners.
Right.
Another basis for reparation. So what the thing is about the argument, it's a two-faceted argument against the woke culture. Number one, it sets the basis for establishing social equity. And then number two, it gives you quantitative, specific, measurable outcomes and policy that can be used as the basis for corrective measures. And both of those are bad things according to some.
And also,
but the thing that I think the left should do more often, and I've had to do this as an instructor,
yes, sir.
People tend to get tangential when it comes to a discussion. They need to learn to keep people on topic. You know, I look at critical race theory and how the people on the right, they throw it out of context. They say it's going to make black kids hate white kids and all that when that's not even being taught in schools.
Mm-hmm.
And so what people need to do as part of a debate, and I've had to do that in academia, is make people keep things in context. So when people say things like that, have them point out parts of critical race theory publications that would do that. But they know that's not the case, but what they're afraid of is it's going to draw their own offspring from them further culturally than they are already based on rap music and black culture alone.
Right.
Okay.
So,
Carol.
and what you mix that with a narrowing demographic, it's a reason that Fox News specializes in paranoia and grievance politics.
They're masters of it.
And also, answer this question for us, please. What do you think about the denial of how America obtained his wealth via King Cotton?
Well, it's simply that. It's a denial that can't be substantiated. And that goes back to what I'm saying about being specific. You know, you have measurable records, you have documents, you have inheritance, you have government records that show how wealth was generated, wealth was transferred and distributed and maintained. And you can look at that and examine those documents and see who was included and who was excluded and who helped generate it.
That's deep.
And then, once again, you have a quantitative basis. And that's when you get beyond opinions and rhetoric. You have an informed opinion. You have quantitative, measurable things that can set the basis for intended policy outcomes. So in other words, you get from the foggy world to where everything is crystal clear and viewable.
Before we tackle the removal of Confederate statues of heroes and supermen like Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson and the rest of these naked Negrasses, what do you think about the statue removal that's been going down lately, Dr. Harris?
Well, I'll just give you a metaphor. Take it into consideration if blacks tried a revolution in this country and failed. To what extent do you think they would be represented in modern times? And how to answer that question.
Man. Hey, Kev, we got to have you in the studio, man.
I'll get there.
We got to have you in the studio. Thanks so much for calling. Thank
you, brothers. Continue to fight the good fight.
Thank you.
Take care.
You have a good one. Kevin made some great points. Especially
what stood out?
Last one.
What stood out?
The last point he made stood out. I mean, I never heard it quite like that. You know, if we had black folks that lost a battle, lost the war, how many statues would be up of us around? I mean, we could win and still have no statues around. I mean, but that was a great point. I think that this next stretch of our country's, the direction of our country in the next 5 to 10 years is going to be very fascinating.
Yes.
Really, the Reagan years, the Bush years, then the Clinton years, and then the Bush years, the other Bush years, were just like a stopgap.
Yes, sir.
And we had moments of reckoning, a la Rodney King, during the period of time of OJ. There was periods of, Katrina, where you saw like real disparities where it's a national conversation. Now we're constantly talking about it because of where we are.
And social media.
And social media. Social media is probably one of the biggest parts of it because you're getting to see what people really feel in real time. You get to see what Americans feel in real time. There's a good portion of white America that's comfortable with Barack Obama. And Barack Obama is as far as they go, as long as he doesn't talk about race. Anything beyond that is radical.
Wow.
That's just the reality of it. That's just the honest reality of the cold reality of it. As soon as Barack Obama talked about in his first 4 months in his term, talked about Skip Gates being arrested. Hey, we don't know if it had anything to do with race. I'm like, wait a minute, hold up. The man showed his ID in his house, at his house, saying this is my ID, but he still got arrested.
So should he have poured a beer on him or sat down and had a drink of beer?
Basically have a beer summit at his house since he's on his property, pour out the beer. Yeah, on him. Yeah, I mean, that could have worked. But then he might have got shot.
At what point in time are we going to say enough is enough? At what point in time are we going to fight fire with water instead of with fire? Because, see, it's like, for all of us non-ditchers, it's like a bully in school. Until you stand up and fight this bully, he's always going to take your lunch money. Bottom line, I saw a video the other day. I'm pretty sure you saw it as well. It was the one in Victoria's Secrets, where the Karen walked up to the lady and assaulted her. She said, I'm paraphrasing. She told the Karen lady, "You're on film," and she broke down and cried like the woman who accused Emmett Till.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, it's just absolutely no respect. Out of all the things that, what we have, I don't know how many videos we have. Thanks again, Morris Media.
Mm-hmm.
What else do we need to see? What else do we need to talk about? I mean,
it's up to people mobilizing and really coming together and realizing where we are. That's really, I don't think.
But one thing, we're good at speeches, bro.
We've
had some of the coldest speeches and
it's about action.
Orators and mouthpieces and knowledge and wisdom and armchair revolutionaries and everything else. You know, I've debated in Leimert Park with the Black Israelites, with the Moors, with the FOIs, with the 5% guys and earths.
That's a lot of folks.
But at the end of the day, we're all on the same team and we're moving forward one foot in front of the other. That's why I always say, man, we got to stop judging each other and we have to stop being petty with one another.
No disagreement.
Because all we have is us, man.
No disagreement.
And if it's not if it's not us, who? And if not now, when? Now, I think every Confederate statue should stay up as a reminder that you using America. So let's go ahead and take a look at the latest statue removal and whether that's good or bad. Using America. Let's check that out.
Cheers broke out Saturday after a statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee was lifted from its base and removed entirely in Charlottesville, Virginia. This comes nearly 4 years after white supremacist protests over plans to remove it led to clashes in which a woman was killed after she was run down by a car driven by a self-described neo-Nazi. On Saturday, Charlottesville Mayor Nakaya Walker spoke to a crowd gathered to watch the statue depart.
As this community and our country attempts to reconcile with this hypothesis of white supremacy, I hope that we can move to an authentic healing by embracing truth.
University of Virginia professor Larisha Hawkins said she was excited to witness this, quote, historical correction.
This is a good day. It's not erasing history. It's removing monuments that tell the wrong narrative about history.
A statue of Confederate General Thomas Stonewall Jackson was also removed Saturday in another city park. Such statues, honoring leaders of the pro-slavery Confederate side in the American Civil War, have become a focus of protest against racism in recent years. In April, Virginia's highest court ruled the city could remove both statues, overturning a state circuit court decision that had upheld a citizen lawsuit. For now, officials say Charlottesville will keep the statues in storage until it makes a final decision about what to do with them.
We're gonna put one of those up of Stonewall Jackson on Compton Boulevard and see how many people come up there and take a picture next to it to pay their respect and their homage.
He said that, I didn't. He said that's my boy, but no, that can't happen. Let me just say this: this is long overdue. We cannot.
It's all jokes.
We should. It is all jokes. He's not being serious.
It's jokes.
It's jokes. Real jokes. Please do jokes.
Yeah, jokes.
Real jokes. This is long overdue because statues in public is memorializing. We should not memorialize. They should be in a museum to learn from, but we should not memorialize traitors, racists, white supremacists that fought against the freedom of black people.
Kidnappers, terrorists,
rapists,
slave owners,
terrorists, just all around.
Land stealers.
We should not be celebrating that. That's all I got to say.
And also, one of the coldest things about these Confederate statues and monuments, one of the organizations that was, I won't say that was solely responsible, but is at the top, are the Daughters of the Confederacy. They put the cold hard cash behind a lot of those monuments that were post-slavery and post-Civil War and post-Reconstruction. I also want to clarify something else. We hear a lot about the Civil War was fought to end slavery. You know why slavery ended? Because of Nat Turner's revolt, because of Denmark Vesey in South Carolina, because of Gabriel Prosser, okay? Also, ultimately, because of Toussaint Louverture in Haiti. See, these are things they don't teach you about. Black folk ain't never been no punks. But if you teach about the fight and the struggle and the standing up, now you got people running around here resurrected. And like they say about the critical race theory, we cannot allow that to happen. One of the things you've always been passionate about, and what I admire you about, is the practice and the implementation of voter suppression throughout the U.S., especially in the South. So let's talk about, let's show this voter suppression, and David, I want you to speak about this on the other side of the video, please.
Absolutely.
If you don't mind.
I do not mind.
Voter suppression is actually a reflection of deep demographic insecurity. And it is a reflection of this ongoing commitment to the illusion that the nation is and will remain a white nation in the vein of old Europe. So we have to be mindful of this because these folks aren't committed to democracy. They don't give a damn about it. They just are committed to raw power. If you don't know that, then you're being naive. We should be mindful of this not only at the level of law, we need to be mindful of it in terms of how polls are manned. We need to be mindful of it in terms of how votes are counted. There are a range of ways in which people are disenfranchised. and we have to see if the broader American public cares. When you see that racism, right, and racial inequality, saturates every facet of the country, every facet of our lives, then it's not about melodrama, where the easily identifiable people that you can condemn are over there. It's about what you're doing, the kind of choices you're making. In our current political moment, Trump sits in that sweet spot between the loud bigots and the soft bigotry of liberals. So he says, right, to the loud racist, right, that we're going to build a wall, that Mexicans are rapists, that, we're overrun by crime. And then to the soft bigotry of liberals, he'll say that, in effect, I'm going to maintain the status quo. The threat of this demographic shift will not upend your way of life. And so what you get are policies that continue, right, to how can I put this, support de facto segregation in the country. Right. So
what he just mentioned there about if America will care, and in so many words, the racism levels of the country always spills out into voting. After the 2020 election, you've had 31 to 33 states put up they call voter integrity bills, which basically makes it much more challenging to vote. For those of you who don't think voting is serious, they murdered several black people and definitely some white folks too, so we wouldn't have the right to vote. And the reason why that is because when you do vote, that's your voice. And if you vote in the right people, you actually get a chance to create policy that can help your community. That's really what this is about. Having the numbers to help your community. So what he was mentioning, what the doctor there was mentioning, was we're about to see, right now we're on the precipice of really seeing where white America is, because that's really what it comes down to. We know where black America is. We know where portions of the Latino community, where they stand. We know where some white folks stand. But we're really about to see it, because this is the second version of our civil and voting rights. What happened to George Floyd and Breonna Taylor is one piece to it, and countless others who've been murdered by police. That's the civil rights, and how we talk about and how do we adjust our criminal justice reform. But our voting rights, which is the big one, this is being tested. And they're not going to outright say they don't want black folks voting, but what they will say, and they'll mask it and shape the narrative as, hey, we don't want illegal voting. So they'll mask it as voter integrity to make it harder for you to vote. And the last thing I'll say to this is one of the biggest parts of the voter integrity bills is to change the power of the I believe the electors, and I may be wrong with this, and basically saying if they don't feel, meaning the powers that be, the Republican Party, doesn't feel that the votes that come in are legit, just a feeling, even though they are legit, then they can overturn the votes, giving the election to a Donald Trump or DeSantis or whoever the Republican nominee would be, making your vote not matter. That's where we are. That's what they'll say. It's about voter ID. It's not. It really isn't about voter. It's about them having control the way they used to have control. That's why all of this is important. All of it. All of it.
Once again, the evidence speaks for itself, and as always, our tongue is our gun, and our wisdom is our ammunition. We can never thank you enough for tuning in. So, special shout out to the poetess and Morris Media.
Yes.
Peace. We're out.